So the first thing to do with our badger is to work on the body front and the body back. The body front is the one with the neckline carved out. Pin your darts in place, pin and stitch your darts. Obviously the darts going inboard, so with the neckline of the front body they're going to the back, and then with the back body they're coming this way. Once you've done the darts, you can actually then join the two body pieces together. So go from the tail end right up across the spine and up to your dot to join that together there. There's the two darts done on the back and the front, and it's been joined together, the back and the front. So we can put that to one side for a moment. Now we're going to be working on the underbelly. So this is his chest and that's his bum. And you've got 4 legs, 2 rear, 2 front. And when you cut them out, I suggest you put just at the top what they are. So you've got 2 rear and 2 front. And when you come to join these, if you lay out your template like this, your legs have a more slanting, that's more slanted and that's more straight, and that slanty bit goes to the back. So you place them like that, your 2 front ones and your 2 back ones at the back. That more slanted goes to the back like that. And then I would pin them in place just roughly so you know where they go, because otherwise it's easy to get confused. And the way you're going to pin them is like that, so that the leg is underneath this opening. And again with that one, the leg goes underneath, and these are just pinned roughly because you can sort it out when you get to the machine. And again with the rear legs, so you've got the slanty one at the back, and again pinned just roughly so you know where they're going. And again that final one. And when you've stitched along here, it's going to be standing up like that, so the seam will be inboard. So if you do it like that with the legs underneath, then you can't go wrong. So you can stitch all the way around, join in the dots. You're going to ease it a little bit, and once you've stitched it you can trim that, not trim it, you can nip it so that it'll ease round the corner. So you do that on all 4 of the legs attached to the body, the belly. So just to show you how to put these legs on, I match up in the corner, and I always have the leg on top because I find it easier to manipulate that way. So a couple of back stitches, and then join up these 2 ends where we want it to finish. I'll keep my finger on there tight, and then just make sure that seam allowance lines up. It's 10mm seam allowance, but in the grand scheme of things this is a badger. It's not got to fit a bust or a waist, so we're not really calling for perfection. So anyway, that's the 4 legs fitted, and then I'm going to snip there and to go around that curve. There's the front ones. Now with the right sides together, we're going to fit the body onto the belly. If you start off with the centre seam, joining the dot on the back where his tail will be, it will all make sense once you do that. So you go down here and to his leg, and you're going to leave the feet open, the base of the leg open, So that'll be your first join. So go from 1 foot up the leg, join at the seam, across there, the centre, join at that seam and down. And then we do this is the front where you've got the curve, so you can do that one. You can go from the leg and up to the belly, along the belly and down the other leg. So all that can be joined. And the chest, here's the chest. So you can join that side, the other side of the front leg. And up to the top. And then the other side of the front. It's probably not easy to see as it's all in white. And that goes up to the 2 dots there, join there. And the long side, which is actually the back of the badger, just do the legs and round the corner, because this is going to be where you're stuffing. So the legs and about 1 inch along the belly, because you're going to put a card in there to give it a little bit of a flat belly, and you need quite an opening for that. So 1 inch or just round the corner, really, round here. Okay, so there we are. The front belly you can stitch from up the leg, along the belly and down. The tail area, up the leg, along the bum and down the next leg. The long side, which is the back of the badger, up 1 leg and just, sorry, my battery just went there, so I was just telling that you could go up the back leg and just stitch just about 1 inch, and the same at this end, so that is an opening for your stuffing. So stitch and clip where necessary, and then we're on to putting our piece of card in and the stuffing for it. That's the base, the belly fitted now. So as you can see, I've gone along its bottom and down its back legs, then up that back leg, along the tummy and down the front leg, and then up the front of that front leg up to the top of the chest, and the same the other side, front leg up to the top of the chest. And then this belly, I've gone just round the corner, up that front leg, up round the corner, and up the back leg just round the corner, because that is our opening now to stuff it. We're now moving to the head, and I've got the pattern piece here, and this is a dart, and what I've done is to just pierce it on that line and then copy that through onto the pattern. Just see my markings there, but do it very carefully, because this centre part of the badger will be having a white panel through there, so you want to do it very delicately. so that you don't show any, I don't know, black markings or anything like that, otherwise they will grin through. But mark out your dart and the 2 dots there and your centre point at the base there. Also, with your left and right face, just put a little note on there, left side, right side of the main panel, the head, and then on the left side just put a left and right, so you know that you're going to attach it to the right side. So the first job is to do the dart, get that out of the way. I've done the dart there, that's all ready, and make sure that obviously it goes that way, so you've got the badger is looking at you like that, so your dart underneath. Now going back to this marking of the fabric right and left, just be aware that don't make it too dark with, you know, a permanent mark or anything like that, because you might find that that will grin through when you come to put your white bits on for the badger. You can see here I've written left on there. Well, perhaps that's not such a good idea. You could just do a couple of tailor tacks, so you know 2 tailor tacks for the left side and, you know, nothing for the right, but just be aware of that fact. So now we're going to join our dots on the nose, left hand side, and we join them up there, and I do these in 2 parts, so I will go pin and stitch up there, turning that so we get up to the top there, and then I will do the same for the right hand side. So join in the dots at the top of the nose and do likewise to the right. Once you've done those 2, then come down to the neckline. I'll show you that in a moment. There's our head, both side faces attached. Just snip the dart there, and you can, if you prefer a different shape to the head, you could make that deeper or shallower accordingly. So we turn that through, right side out, and then we're going to fit that to our body. So we have our body here, and right sides together, pop the head inside that opening, and you've got 3 dots here. This one is the centre front, so that goes right under his chin and joins up with the dot there. And then these 2 join up on the seams. You might think it's a little bit out, but it's taken into account the 10mm seam allowance, so it should just line up with the seam allowance there, because the seam is on an angle. And then the back of the head, the seams line up there. And then on this, which is like the spine, joins up there. So you could tack that round if you want to, or just pin like I have, and just take it slow and try and keep your 10mm seam allowance all the way round. Lining up as you go. The head's nicely stuffed now, right into the nose, and I've just gone down to that join really, and we can add more stuffing to that accordingly. And the next thing we have to do is to cut out a template of the belly. So it's got the back the bottom bit along the sides up to that dot and across to the other one. This actually is a bit short, but it's not going to make any difference, but if you have got enough just to go across to there is fine. And this is actually from an envelope where it's do not bend, but you could use a Weetabix carton, maybe two stuck together, two sheets stuck together, and this is actually just an office file, but this is two sheets stuck together. So don't go out and buy anything, I'm sure you've got something around the house. So as I say, that's about 5mm all round, slightly smaller than your template. And then we're going to get that into its belly and then start to stuff. So that fits in like that. You can see where it goes round the leg holes. Won't really start taking shape until we put quite a lot of stuffing in there. But to begin with, you can stuff through here. As we get further up, we might be closing this section here and then stuffing from the top to get a nice shape, because there will come a point where you can't get beyond the cardboard, but you can certainly put quite a lot in there to get you going anyway. So that's how we'll start off anyway, is to put your stuffing in. You need to put a fair bit in first, and then you can start manipulating your cardboard and get it in the right place. I'll carry on doing that, and then I'll show you when I'm happy with the shape. Take a little while and a fair bit of stuffing, I have to say. This is how far I've done so far. I've got the card in there, and you can see it just goes beyond the actual seam there, but that's okay, that's alright. So I've stuffed quite a lot from this side, and now I've closed up this seam here, and I've opened up another seam at the top. Whoops. And I'm stuffing more in there to give it that sort of nice shape there. So I've just opened up actually in between the two darts to try and give a bit more, get as much more wadding in there as I can. I need to make sure that that's straight. I've just tried to put a bit of stuffing up through the leg, so just to make sure that that's going to go. But it doesn't matter if the wood, if your card is in the way there, because it will just go round it anyway. So that's going to, eventually they will be filled up. So you need to carry on and work on it so you get a nice shape to it. My dog's come along to have a look. Hello? Good girl. Good girl. Here's our badger, stuffed now and ready for patching. So I've closed up its belly. I've opened up between the two darts and stuffed again from the top to get a nice shape and make sure that his head area is still nicely shaped as well. And you can see by putting that board in, it means it's got a flat base, otherwise it would be a bit roly-poly. The legs I've stuffed, but they will need sorting out a bit later anyway. So what you can do is stuff them, then just put a couple of stitches there, just hold it in place. And now it's ready for the patching, which I'm going to use various irregular shapes of grey or black, and I'm using at the moment this type of thread on these cones. They're either single, 2 or 3 or 4 ply, very economical to use actually, and easy with obviously just pulling them off and using those. So but embroidery thread or wool you could use depending on the fabric that you're using, but I'm mainly using cotton on this one, so I think that thread is ideal, but I'll let you see it when I've done a few patches. What I've done first of all with the Badger is to cover the complete base with one fabric. In fact, this was a pair of my mum's old trousers, so I think that looks quite good for his tummy, and I've just tacked it in place all the way around. So then I'll bring my patches down to cover that. It's easier to do that in one piece, and it saves you going through onto the cardboard. Here's my patching so far. I've done under his chin, his chest, down the side, over his back, and I'm just working down this side now. And you can see where I've done his belly, and that's come up, so my patches will gradually come down and meet that to cover up my tacking stitches. We're leaving his bottom because the tail is going on there, and once the tail's gone on, then these will go over top of the flange of the tail so that it blends in nicely. I'm going to carry on and come down his legs, but his legs, the legs of the Badger are usually that bit darker, so I've got some black fabric for that. And while I'm on the subject, you could have actually cut this panel out in your black fabric anyway, in your finished fabric, as you also the inside of the legs, which means that you're not actually then patching the inside of the legs, but that's up to you. I'm going to patch them anyway, but you could have done that out of a black fabric to save you that job. And also at this point, I don't know if you can see this, but these curved needles are invaluable for this sort of work, especially when you get under the chin and you have to go underneath that area. They take a bit of getting used to. In fact, I couldn't get on with them to begin with, but now that is the only needle I use. I don't use a straight needle at all, so definitely worth investing in one of those. You can see now that I've virtually finished the patching. I've got a few threads. I leave those so that I can pick it up again when I start under in different areas. So I've done the front here, round his chest and the back, and I've taken the patches down to the legs, and I'm using this, it's a t-shirt actually, a black t-shirt fabric to go around the legs. And now you get to the stage where you need to put the leg support in. So this one, I've cut it to span the base and then just go up the legs, just shy of the base of the legs. And if it does, if you've left it a little bit long, cover it with a piece of masking tape so you don't scratch your table. So I've stitched that in place, and I've just cut this one accordingly, and I'm about to stitch that on. So it's just really from corner to corner and then come up the leg. I may do a template, it just depends, because it's quite straightforward to do really on this one, but it is literally just one piece of wire down, along and up, and when you've stitched that tightly, that really is quite secure. So I'm going to do that one, do that and finish off the legs, so I'm covering it up, patch over this wire, close that up and patch round all four legs so they're closed. I finished off the base, covered up the wire, and you can see I've done I've patched down the side of the leg, over the patch, and then up that side, and again with the front, so that's all nicely concealed. Each leg I folded over about an inch. I've put a pin in there, and I will just stitch those in place shortly. Next job I think will be to do the tail. Now with the tail, we've cut out our 2 pieces in our shell fabric, and I've got 2 pieces of finished fabric underneath here, because patching under the tail where it's close to the body is a bit awkward, so you're better off actually putting your right sides together, 2 pieces of finished fabric, and then we'll sew through it all together. So we're going to start from the top all the way down to this little pointy bit, and then up to that dot, and that way we'll have the finished fabric already in place and we won't have any fiddly patching to do. When you've stitched that together, trim off, especially around the corner, trim the seam allowance so that it's easier, it's not so bulky. Turn it right side out and you can begin to stuff and get a nice point to it. So you can really begin to stuff that, and then we attach it to the badger, and the tail is just, it almost touches the ground actually, but you've got his feet to go on, so I think at this stage you can make sure it does touch the ground, because it'd be about ½ an inch maybe higher at a later point. So line up the seam of the tail with the seam of the body and just pin that in place, and then you can do the same underneath, which I may not be able to show you on camera, but can line up that seam with the seam there as well, which I can see. And then you've got either side, you've got 2 pieces of a flange that sticks out, so begin to edge that around all the way around the tail and pin in place, because you want a nice smooth transition between the tail and the body, and just begin to stuff as you go. For example, you could just pin one side in place and then start to stuff from this side here. So this does elongate the body a little bit as well, so I'm trying to keep stuffing and then having a look. It's a bit of finagling going on here, where you're doing a little bit and then standing back to look at it to make sure it's nice and smooth. You can see how eventually it'll come to a nice smooth finish around here, and you gradually pull this flange out so that it looks nice and smooth. And then gradually just keep stuffing. It might be that you could do this side so it looks good, and then unpin that side and then do a bit of stuffing from there. And we will probably put a couple of stitches underneath to just hold it in place. So once you're happy with how it's positioned and it's nice and smooth, you can stitch all the way around it, as we have in some of the other animals. Stitch all around it, and then we begin to patch over top of that. I'll show you when I'm happy with it and I've done my stitching around the outside. Then once you're happy with how it's positioned, you've pinned it in place, stitch around the outside, and then you can gradually bring your patches back over, and with additional patches you can cover up the bald patches. Then underneath you've pulled these little flanges out, and then your patch will just cover those bits up, and additional patches where necessary. And that's just touching the floor, the ground there. So once his feet go on, it'll be up about about 10mm, I suppose. That's a completed tail. So I've patched all around it. And if you want to, if you haven't got it very close at the bottom, you can just do a couple of little extra tacks there. I haven't done that yet. And I think that's about it almost needs to touch the surface. I've given you a template for the facial markings. I've cut out my 2 black markings accordingly, but I want you to measure the distance here and the distance there. You could probably do this on your own anyway, but anyone who's a beginner might just want this assistance anyway. So by measuring that, you can then put that onto your head accordingly. I'm going to cover my head first of all with this white, it's a t-shirt fabric, just to give it a nice clear crisp white. So then when you've got your side panels, you can pop them on there and then do the measurement. So my one measures at 100%. It's 2 centimetres at the base and 4 at the back. So once I've covered my head in this white, then I can add these panels and do the measurements to make sure they're in right place. Put lots of pins in so it doesn't move as you're beginning to stitch it in or patch it in place. Now the head's been sewn, panels have been sewn on now. I've just used a black thread to try and make it look almost like hairs. And where I've attached this over the nose, I've just done some stitches along there, almost again looking like hairs, and then the back of the head's been done as well, and down this side. So we're now going to move on to the nose. You've got a nose pattern, and all I've done is to pierce in that hole and then along there, either side, and then put that on 2 scraps of fabric, same fabric, and go through with a felt pen, so you actually then mark it on this side. And the reason we have two fabrics is we're going to embroider that sort of circle of the nose and the snout, and then we won't cut it out to the circle just yet, because once we've embroidered that, we would then be able to stuff some fabric underneath here and then cut out the circle and stitch it all the way around before it goes onto the nose. I've used this lighter fabric so you can see it better, but in actual fact I've used it on the smaller one as well, and all I've done is just gone over with some black marker pen to dull it down, because obviously the nose would normally be dark, very dark colour. So I'm going to now do that embroidery and take you through that process. The nose is looking like this now, so I've embroidered the sort of nostrils and the snout, and then padding it out with some wadding all the way around and then pin in place. There's more to go in there yet because it's got to be nice and firm, and then we'll be stitching round the outside of that to make it nice and firm. And this is one that I did earlier on the smaller version of the Badger, so that it's the top layer of the nose sort of matches up with the back layer, and it slightly gives you that protrusion there. So that's how it's going to look like in the end. So carry on after you've done your embroidery, stuff it around the edges, and then you need to push that down so it's quite nice and firm, and if you can get it up in between there, you need something pointy to push it up in there, and then we're going to stitch round to keep it nice and firmly in place. So I've stitched all the way round now. I'm going to trim a little bit, sort of about 1/8 of an inch all the way round, and then go over that to secure it. So then we finished up with our snout. And now I'm just going to go over that seam nice and tightly so that that doesn't fray before we fit it onto our badger. I've just attached the nose to our badger. What you need to do is, you don't want it to protrude any further, so right through those nostrils, if you put a couple of pins in so it's nice and tight up against the butt of its nose, line up the centre with your centre seam. You'll be able to feel it through there, and then underneath and round to the sides, because you want it to sort of curve around the actual nose itself, so kind of mould it to it. So I've pinned that in place. I'm going to go and stitch that all the way around now, and trying to pull it nice and tight to the actual nose. For the ear, you've got to cut out 4 pieces in white, stitch 2 together, right sides together, turn them through. You stitch just about 1/2 inch up either side, because then when you turn that through, you're going to attach your black fabric to the inside of that, outside rather, like that. Stitch that all the way around, 1 on either side. You might want to stiffen this. I've actually put another couple of pieces of fabric inside. It doesn't really warrant cardboard because I think that makes it a bit too stiff, but if you put some slightly thicker fabric in there, you can then mould it a little bit more, which is what I've done with this one here. So that's sort of in place. When I come to stitch it, I will give it just a very slight curve, and then go over these white bits with some black fabric. I trimmed it off, but it still needs a bit of black fabric to cover up that white there. But you can see where I've stitched it on, quite scruffy, and I'll stitch that so you can see how I've attached it to the head. So we finished the nose now. That's all nicely stitched on in place all the way around, and I've kept the fabric actually, and I've just used some black marker pen to go over it, leaving that as a sort of highlight at the top there. Ears are on in place, and I've gone over the side sections where the white was showing through, and now we move on to the eyes. You could just use an eye and glue it in place, which it still looks good, but I'm going to show you how to. I've done these like eyelids to them. So working on the eyes, I've got these ones which are probably about 18mm. These are for hair eyes actually, but what I've done is just gone over with a black marker, because badger's eyes are very dark. So the black marker, it might rub off while we're doing this process, but you could just still go over it again anyway. So the first thing we do is we need a scrap of fabric. This is actually a t-shirt, and you really need a fabric that is knitted like a t-shirt, thin enough so that it'll go around a curve and will stick well, and sort of the right sort of colour, so a kind of a light grey. So the first thing is to stick our eye to this fabric so that it doesn't move around. And then we do the eye in 2 halves, so the top lid and the bottom lid, effectively, I suppose. So put some glue on for underneath the eye. And you need a strip of fabric, just fairly roughly, and then we are going to place that right sides together, because this is on the right side, and go like that, and then get a nice sharp edge under that half there. So you can see that's sticking down there half of the eye, nice and firmly, and then you pull that bit down. Oh no, we don't, we put the glue on first. We want more glue on this half. And then we pull this down, so then we've got the right side showing, till you've got a bit of a eyelid, and it covers up half of the eye, so the base part of it. And then you just do the same for the top. So you need another scrap of fabric, glue this again at the top, just butt up to that where it's folded from the lower eyelid. And then do the same, right side down, and go right the way down round it to the eye itself, and you can I can feel the lower lid there, so go right up to that, pressing it down so that it's nicely stuck. And then, oh, I keep forgetting to glue this second bit. Glue this quite a long way out, because you're going to pull it out. And then pull this back, and you want to reveal a fair bit of the eye, but you're also trying to make it look like it's got an eyelid there. So I'm going to pull that out a bit further actually. You may need a couple of goes at doing this, but I think it's worth it, because it does make for quite a nice eye. My fingers have got sticky now, but that's it. And you can possibly just bring that down a little bit more. And close the sides up. And then you're going to trim round them like I have here, to get your two eyes, but don't trim them just yet, wait until they're well and truly dry. And you can adjust that accordingly. You can have them more wide open or more closed, it's up to you. But that's how our badger will look when he's got his eyes on. And they're actually quite low down, the eyes. You need to look at a few photographs, and I mean, I think it's nice that they're all individual, but yeah, they are quite low down, the eyes on the badger. And all I'm going to do is glue those in place, but try and get the glue all the way around the outside so that it sticks nice and firmly. You don't want it lifting up at all. It's too firm to stitch in place, because where you've brought it down and it's on the glue, don't think you'd be able to stitch that. I've just fitted his eye, and I've used the glue gun for that, so it's nice and secure. But before I used the template to do a couple of little small stitches so I know exactly where it goes. And also the point of the eye, the corner of the eye, is obviously coming up towards the nose area. I always think putting the eyes on is such a dramatic change. He's looking quite good now. Okay, for your badger's paws, you need your paw paper pattern, and you need to cut out, for each paw, 3 pieces of your chosen finish fabric. So 3 of those, and then 1 cardboard cutout. But with the cardboard, you need to just trim it off by 5mm all the way around. It doesn't have to be precise, but as 5mm, that takes into account the seam allowance. So with 2 of the paws, pop those together and do a 5mm seam allowance from about here to here, because you've actually got to pop the cardboard inside it. So all the way around through to the top, and stopping about there, and do a little back stitch so it doesn't split open when you put the card in. So a 5mm seam allowance on just 2 of them. Now you need to cut a piece of 2mm copper wire, about 4 inches bigger than the edge of this. So all I do is just run it along here to get a measurement, and then add 4 inches. Start in the middle, and this piece of wire needs to be just on the top of the edge of it, and then tape that in place and curve it round so it's staying on the top of that edge. So we're not making it any wider, that's the thing. This bends very easily. The galvanised wire is great for real support, but you wouldn't be able to use it for this, because it needs to be quite flexible. So you hold that in place with the masking tape. I'm sorry about the noise in the background, I get used to it, but it's just my husband in his little recording studio. So I've turned that, I've stitched 5mm seam allowance all around, turn that through, and then we're going to put our cardboard inside. It will go, and obviously if you've used a special stretchy fabric. And then we're going to lightly stuff that top area, and I've got some stuffing in here. Of his paw. You only stuff the front bit because the leg is going to take part over here anyway, so the leg's going to fit here. So once you've stuffed that about like that, so it's probably about ½ an inch thick, I suppose. Then just stitch all the way around here so you're enclosing the cardboard and the wire, and right up to the back. At this point, mould these round the edge of the cardboard and then directly up, because that's going to go up inside the leg. And then you can tape those together. So stitch all the way around, enclosing the cardboard. This obviously is a stretch fabric, and what I would recommend it's much easier to obviously go around the corners to stuff and to deal with. You could use a woven fabric, but you'd need to adjust how you get the cardboard in there, maybe do a side slit like that. So that's all stitched around there now, nice and tightly, and the stuffing is towards the front end, and if you find it tends to get towards the heel part, you can always just put a pin in and poke it back up the other end, because you don't really want any extra height at the heel, so if it moves a bit you can pop it back there. Now we've got 5 claws here. This is again the 2mm copper wiring. If they come off, I mean mine was on a reel so they've got a natural curve to them anyway, but if it ends up getting a bit straight you can just put it over something rounded and just press it down and it'll make it a slight curve on it. And what we're going to do is hot glue 5 claws on there, so they want to touch the ground, touch the surface, and we're going to pop them in place on the top there. I suggest you do the first one and then space out the other ones to either side, and then obviously they'd be painted or use nail varnish. So here we go. Try and do this in front of the camera. So hang on, let me pop that in place first. So that's the first one in the middle, touching the surface. I'm going to put a good blob of hot glue on top there and try and avoid my fingers. Oops. So hold it in place until it sets. And then another one. They've got incredibly long claws actually, and I know my husband always says to keep the dog away from any badgers. That's quite right. way. Sorry, I'm going to have to do it that way around, I think, to hold it in place better. And then you can adjust these if you want to at a later date, but make sure the glue's gone well hard first, and you can make them shorter if you want to. Okay, so just carry on in that vein. So I've got another 2 to go either side, so just like that. Okay. So there's our 5 claws on there now. It's still a bit hot. It's not quite dried off yet, so I'm not going to do much to it yet. You can put another lot over top of it just as extra security. With your 3rd piece of fabric from the claw, you're going to pop that over top and sew that down from one side to the other. So sew it over top and in between those claws all the way round to around about here, because what we'll do, this bit will flip up and we'll put the leg on there, and then we will stitch this around the leg. So just from about there to there, the widest part. So I'm going to stitch that on there now. The top part of the paw has now been stitched on from there and around, and we can put a little bit more stuffing on top of those claws now, but only at the front end. We don't want anything down this end because that's going onto the body, and you can put a little bit more on there in a short while once we start attaching it to our leg. So zoom out a bit. No, I won't. There you go. So I'm going to put that one onto here. So you poke the wires up between the stuffing and the shell fabric, push that up in place. The top part of the paw, this final flap if you like, that stays up out of the way for the moment, and we're going to secure this in place. So from the edge of the cardboard onto the leg, including through the shell fabric, because we want a nice secure fit there. And so you might have to do a little bit of poking around to bring the shell fabric down and in place and the cover over top of it, but you want a nice sort of stitch all the way around there. With me, I'm going to have my paws slightly sticking out a bit, so not directly forward but just slightly, as though, because his head is on the turn, I just thought it would be nice if his claws are slightly turned. So once you've secured that all the way around, I'm going to attach that all the way around along this back heel part, and put more stuffing in if you need to make it firm. If you've got any hollows there, just pop the stuffing in to make it nice and firm all the way around. So I'm going to go and do that now, and then I'll come back and show you how to do this top flap bit, because we might, once we've got that secure, we might add a little bit more stuffing. We're going to roll this back and stitch that in place. And essentially you want a nice firm stitch all the way around here to incorporate the shell and your covering fabric so it looks nice and neat. Now we've got to this stage with our leg, so we've gone all the way around. In fact, I did it in 2 stages. First of all, I picked up the shell fabric with the base of the foot, and then I went round again bringing up the finished fabric, so that was nice and tight. That made it a bit easier actually, and I pinned the wire at the back in place as well, so it remained at an angle. So I've done all that now, and you'll notice obviously you've got this flap forward. So what you got to do is put as much stuff in there as you like, but they've got quite fat paws, and then they sort of come up a little bit to the top here. So I'm going to put some stuff in the well, over where the glue was, and then bring a bit more up round here, and then this flap I'm going to fold under and stitch that around the base, stitch it to this base, and so that it's up underneath the tucked underneath there, if you like. So that's going to come round like that and stitched in place. But you want a bit more stuffing over top of the glue, but not too much. But they have got, as I say, they have got quite fat paws. So then we're nearly there. And there's our Bollinger Scrappy Badger.